Yeah, that's right. So Carmelo Anthony is set to return to court next month as his attorneys work to overturn his murder conviction. So here's some of the information and details that we do know this morning. The now 19-year-old was convicted of murder in June and sentenced to 35 years in prison for the stabbing death of Austin Metcalf during a high school track meet in Frisco. Less than 24 hours after that verdict, his legal team filed a notice of appeal. Two hearings have now been set. The first one comes on August 19th, and during that one, Anthony's attorneys are expected to ask the state district judge, John Roach Jr., to be removed from overseeing the post-conviction proceedings. Now, that motion will be heard by a judge out of San Antonio, and the
The
following day.
silence inside the courtroom was expected to last only a few moments. Instead, it became the kind of silence that follows a tragedy no one can undo. Every document, every motion, and every legal argument now points back to a single morning in Frisco, Texas. A morning that forever changed two families and ignited one of the most closely watched criminal cases in recent memory. What began as an ordinary high school track meet ended with 17-year-old Austin Metcalf suffering a fatal stab wound after an altercation in the stands. Within minutes, a celebration of student athletics transformed into a homicide investigation that would dominate headlines across the country. The case quickly became more than a criminal prosecution. It became a lightning rod for debate, drawing intense public attention, widespread social media speculation, and fierce arguments about self-defense, justice, and race. More than a year later, the jury reached its decision. Karmelo Anthony was convicted of murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. For many, the verdict appeared to mark the end of one painful chapter. But in the legal system, a conviction is not always the final word. Appeals, post-trial motions, and constitutional challenges can reshape the future of even the most closely scrutinized cases. Now, new developments are pulling the case back into the spotlight. Court records reveal that Anthony is expected to return to court next month as his new legal team asks for a new trial and seeks to have the judge who presided over the original proceedings removed from post-trial hearings. The defense argues that constitutional errors occurred during the trial, including claims surrounding courtroom access, judicial impartiality, and decisions that affected Anthony's choice not to testify. Prosecutors have maintained that the trial was conducted fairly, and the court has not yet ruled on these post-conviction claims. Those hearings are expected to determine whether any of those arguments have legal merit. Behind every motion filed with the court lies a deeper question. Can a verdict that has already reshaped so many lives be challenged successfully, or will the conviction stand exactly as the jury delivered it? The upcoming hearings are not another criminal trial. They are a battle over procedure, fairness, and whether the original proceedings complied with the Constitution. The outcome could influence the next phase of Anthony's appeal, but it will not erase the devastating loss at the center of the case. As the next court date approaches, investigators, attorneys, journalists, and both families once again find themselves preparing for another round of legal scrutiny. Every filing is being examined. Every allegation is being dissected. Every decision made inside that courtroom could determine whether this case moves closer to closure or enters an entirely new chapter. This story doesn't begin with the appeal. It begins long before the courtroom, on a spring morning when two teenagers crossed paths, and within seconds, lives were changed forever. Long before court filings, appeals, and national headlines, this story began with two teenagers whose lives were headed in completely different directions, yet whose paths would cross in a matter of seconds. Neither family could have imagined that an ordinary school track meet would become the setting for a tragedy that would leave one young man dead and another facing the rest of his life inside the criminal justice system. Austin Metcalf was remembered by family, friends, and classmates as an energetic student-athlete with a bright future. Those closest to him described someone who enjoyed competition, valued his teammates, and looked forward to the opportunities that lay ahead after high school. His death left an empty space that no courtroom ruling could ever fill. Karmelo Anthony was also a high school student with ambitions of his own. Before the incident, he had been known primarily through school and athletics rather than criminal allegations. Everything changed after prosecutors accused him of fatally stabbing Austin during a confrontation at a track meet in Frisco, Texas. Anthony maintained through his defense that he acted in self-defense, while prosecutors argued the evidence proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the killing constituted murder. Ultimately, a jury agreed with the prosecution and returned a guilty verdict. As the case gained national attention, public opinion became deeply divided. Social media transformed a criminal prosecution into a cultural flashpoint, with countless rumors circulating alongside verified court records. Separating fact from speculation became increasingly difficult, making the courtroom the only place where evidence, not internet opinion, could determine the outcome. Before we continue, if you enjoy carefully researched true crime stories that focus on verified facts, remember to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new investigation. The deeper investigators looked into that day, the more they realized that the fatal encounter had unfolded in mere moments. But understanding how those moments began would become one of the most contested parts of the entire case. As investigators reconstructed the events leading up to the fatal confrontation, they focused on a series of moments that unfolded in rapid succession. Witness statements, surveillance footage, and physical evidence became essential pieces of a timeline that prosecutors and defense attorneys would later interpret in very different ways. According to evidence presented in court, the encounter began in the spectator area during a high school track meet. What initially appeared to be a disagreement over seating quickly escalated into a confrontation between the two teenagers. Those nearby would later describe the exchange as brief but tense, though individual accounts differed on exactly how the conflict developed in its final seconds. The defense argued that Karmelo Anthony believed he faced an immediate threat and acted in self-defense. Prosecutors, however, maintained that the evidence did not support that claim and argued that the use of deadly force was not legally justified under the circumstances. These competing narratives became the central issue presented to the jury throughout the trial. As investigators interviewed witnesses, they also worked to separate first-hand observations from assumptions that had spread online. Social media was flooded with conflicting claims, many of which were never supported by evidence introduced in court. Detectives instead relied on physical evidence, witness testimony, and forensic findings to establish what could be verified. For Austin Metcalf's family, every new detail reinforced the painful reality that a promising young life had been lost in an encounter lasting only moments. For Anthony's family, the legal battle ahead would determine whether the claim of self-defense could withstand the scrutiny of a courtroom. With emotions running high across the community, investigators knew their work had to remain grounded in facts alone. The evidence they collected would soon become the foundation of one of the most closely watched murder trials in Texas, where every detail would be challenged before a jury tasked with deciding the truth. The events that unfolded at the Frisco track meet happened in less than a minute, but their consequences would last forever. What began as a confrontation between two teenagers ended with one of them suffering a fatal stab wound, sending students, coaches, and first responders into a scene of confusion and panic. According to evidence presented during the trial, Austin Metcalf was stabbed once in the chest during the altercation. Witnesses immediately realized the severity of his injury as people rushed to help and emergency services were called. Despite life-saving efforts at the scene and the rapid response of medical personnel, Austin died from his injuries. His death transformed what had been a school athletic event into a homicide investigation. Officers quickly secured the area, interviewed witnesses, and began documenting every piece of physical evidence. Investigators worked to establish an accurate timeline using witness accounts, forensic evidence, and available recordings. As the investigation progressed, authorities identified Karmelo Anthony as the suspect. He was taken into custody, and prosecutors later charged him with murder. Throughout the legal proceedings, Anthony's defense maintained that he acted in self-defense, arguing that he believed he faced an immediate threat during the confrontation. Prosecutors disputed that claim, contending that the evidence demonstrated the use of deadly force was not legally justified. Both sides presented their interpretations before a jury, which ultimately found Anthony guilty of murder. The tragic death of Austin Metcalf left an entire community searching for answers. A single moment of violence had altered countless lives, leaving grieving families, shaken classmates, and a nation watching as the criminal justice system worked to determine accountability. While the crime itself was over in seconds, the legal battle surrounding those seconds was only beginning, with every decision and every piece of evidence destined to be examined in extraordinary detail. In the days following the fatal stabbing, investigators shifted their focus from the chaotic crime scene to the painstaking work of building a criminal case. Every witness statement was compared against physical evidence. Every photograph, forensic report, and digital record was reviewed to determine exactly what could be proven in court rather than what had spread across social media. Detectives interviewed students, school staff, coaches, and first responders who had been present during the incident. Their goal was to establish a reliable timeline of the confrontation and determine whether the physical evidence supported the accounts given by those who witnessed the event. Medical findings regarding Austin Metcalf's fatal injury became a critical part of the prosecution's case, while the defense closely examined the same evidence to support its argument that Karmelo Anthony acted in self-defense. As the investigation progressed, the case attracted national attention. Online speculation exploded, with countless claims circulating before they could be verified. Investigators and prosecutors repeatedly relied on evidence gathered through the official investigation rather than public opinion. The courtroom would ultimately become the place where those competing narratives were tested under oath. Months later, after Anthony's conviction, the legal battle entered a new phase. His defense team filed post-trial motions seeking a new trial, alleging constitutional and procedural errors during the proceedings. Prosecutors opposed those requests, arguing that the trial had been conducted fairly and that the jury's verdict should remain in place. Those motions have set the stage for Anthony's expected return to court, where a judge will consider the legal issues raised by the defense. If you're enjoying this in-depth coverage and want more fact-based true crime stories, be sure to like this video, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Although the investigation had reached its conclusion, the fight over what happened and whether the law was applied correctly was far from over. The next chapter would move from the evidence itself to the courtroom, where every decision would carry enormous consequences for everyone involved. When the trial began, the courtroom became the only place where facts, evidence, and legal arguments carried weight. Months of investigation were condensed into testimony, forensic reports, and witness accounts, as both the prosecution and the defense sought to convince the jury that their interpretation of the events was the correct one. Prosecutors argued that the evidence established beyond a reasonable doubt that Karmelo Anthony committed murder. They presented witness testimony, physical evidence, and medical findings to support their position that the use of deadly force was not legally justified. Their case centered on the claim that the fatal stabbing was a criminal act for which Anthony should be held accountable. The defense presented a different narrative. Anthony's attorneys argued that he acted in self-defense, maintaining that he believed he was facing an immediate threat during the confrontation. They challenged aspects of the prosecution's case and urged jurors to consider the circumstances leading up to the fatal encounter. Ultimately, it was the jury's responsibility to weigh both sides against the evidence presented in court. After deliberations, the jury returned a verdict finding Karmelo Anthony guilty of murder. The court later sentenced him to 35 years in prison, bringing the trial phase of the case to a close. For Austin Metcalf's family, the verdict represented a measure of legal accountability, though it could never erase the loss they continue to live with. For Anthony and his family, the conviction marked the beginning of a new legal battle through the appeals process. Today, that battle continues. Anthony's legal team has filed post-conviction motions seeking a new trial, alleging procedural and constitutional errors during the original proceedings. Those claims remain before the court, and no ruling has yet changed the conviction or sentence. With Anthony expected back in court next month, the upcoming hearings will determine whether those legal arguments warrant any further action, ensuring that this closely watched case remains far from its final chapter. Even after the jury returned its verdict, the impact of this case continued to ripple far beyond the courtroom. For Austin Metcalf's family, no sentence could replace the son, brother, and friend they lost. Public statements from loved ones reflected both profound grief and gratitude for those who had supported them throughout the investigation and trial. While the legal process had reached a major milestone, their loss remained permanent. The Frisco community also continued to grapple with the tragedy. A school track meet, an event meant to celebrate teamwork and athletic achievement, had become the scene of a fatal act of violence. Students, parents, coaches, and teachers were left processing the emotional consequences, with many calling for greater conflict resolution and school safety measures to help prevent similar incidents in the future. At the same time, Karmelo Anthony's family and supporters remained committed to pursuing every legal avenue available. Following his conviction and 35-year sentence, his attorneys filed post-trial motions and prepared for further court proceedings, arguing that legal errors affected the fairness of the original trial. Prosecutors have opposed those claims, maintaining that the conviction was supported by the evidence and should stand. As Anthony is expected to return to court next month, both families once again find themselves waiting for another important legal decision. The case has also served as a reminder of how quickly misinformation can spread during high-profile investigations. Throughout the proceedings, countless rumors circulated online, often overshadowing verified evidence presented in court. It underscored the importance of relying on official court records and credible reporting rather than speculation. Although the courtroom may soon hear new legal arguments, one fact can never be changed. A young life was lost, another was forever altered, and two families remain connected by a tragedy that neither side will ever truly leave behind. The next hearing may shape the future of the case, but it cannot rewrite the devastating events that brought everyone there. As Karmelo Anthony prepares to return to court next month, the case once again stands at a crossroads. The upcoming hearing is not about deciding guilt or innocence all over again. Instead, it will focus on whether the legal arguments raised by the defense justify any changes to the original proceedings. Until a court rules otherwise, Anthony's conviction and 35-year sentence remain in effect. For Austin Metcalf's loved ones, every new hearing is another painful reminder of the day their lives changed forever. While the legal process continues, the emotional wounds remain. Every court filing, every headline, and every new development brings the tragedy back into public view, forcing those closest to the case to relive unimaginable loss. For Anthony and his family, the appeals process represents one final opportunity to challenge aspects of the trial through the legal system. Whether those arguments succeed or fail will ultimately be determined by the court based on the law and the evidence, not by public opinion or social media speculation. Cases like this remind us that justice is often a long and complicated journey. Courtrooms are designed to examine facts, weigh evidence, and protect legal rights, even after a verdict has been reached. That process can be frustratingly slow, but it exists to ensure that every decision is carefully scrutinized. No matter where people stand on this case, one undeniable truth remains. A teenager lost his life, another lost his freedom, and two families will carry the weight of that day for the rest of their lives. What do you think the upcoming court hearing could mean for this case? Do you believe the conviction will stand, or could the defense's legal arguments change the course of the proceedings? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you found this breakdown informative, please like this video, share it with others, subscribe to Cold Case Files, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our latest true crime investigations. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and remember that behind every case is a real family whose lives have been changed forever.